I have written at this point, I guess, about 26 or 27 books. Not even sure. And I think it's an amazing thing. I think it's an amazing thing simply to have written one book. Whenever I hear somebody who has written a book, I congratulate them. I think that's a terrific thing to do because there are so many folks who say, I think I could write a book. And so many folks who start writing a book and never get past chapter 1 or 2. And so for someone who actually sit down and write a book and finish it, whether it ever gets published or not, I think it's a terrific thing. So I'm proud of simply having done that. My first book was Space Station 7th Grade, followed by Who Put That Hair in My Toothbrush. I think it was my 6th book that was Maniac Magee. Maniac Magee won the Newbery Medal. And a couple of books later, Ringer won a Newbery Honor. And there has been a series of books called School Days. And one of my more recent books is Stargirl, which has attracted a lot of readers around the world and is now under development as a movie. I suppose my latest book, before the one that has just come out now, was Milkweed, historical novel, and my latest is called Eggs. Well, let's see. I guess the first thing I wanted to be was a cowboy. I remember once, maybe 2nd or 3rd grade, I woke up one morning. It wasn't Halloween, but I got dressed in my cowboy outfit, complete with spurs on my boots, and walked to school that day. In those days, you walked to school a half mile. And I don't know what people must have thought, seeing this little kid walking to school like a cowboy. And I walked into classroom, and my teacher took a look at me and said, well, would you like to do something for us? And so I think I stood up in front of the class and sang, I have the spurs that jingle, jangle, jingle, or something like that. So that was my cowboy phase. That lasted for several years, and then I wanted to be a succession of other things. But before long, I decided I wanted to be a Major League Baseball player. I played Little League. I was a shortstop, and I decided I wanted to be a shortstop in the major leagues. So that ambition stayed with me for, I guess, till about halfway through high school. We had some good baseball teams that I played on. We were the Pennsylvania State champions of the Connie Mack Knee-High baseball. And then in high school, I discovered I was not so good at hitting the curveball. And it began to be clear that I wasn't going to become a major leaguer after all. And at about that time, I took an interest in writing and traded in my baseball bat for a pencil and decided now that's what I wanted to do, become a writer. Well, there was a football game, big football game in I guess it was 11th grade. And it was against Lower Merion High School. Lower Merion that year had one of the top teams in the country, high school football. They had been undefeated for 3 straight years. They won 32 straight games. And we were playing them on a Friday night, and we were winning 7-6. One of their runners got loose and made it all the way down to the 1-yard line before we stopped them. I was up in the stands watching the game. I was on the soccer team. So there it was, first down and goal to go on the 1. And 4 times they tried to make those 36 inches. And 4 times we stopped them and won the game 7-6. And Norristown went crazy, kicking cans, yelling, screaming, blaring horns. What did I do? I went home and wrote a poem about that inspirational goal line stand. and wrote it out in longhand, handed it to my father, and pretty much forgot about it. A couple days later, I opened the Norristown Times-Herald newspaper and to the sports page, and there's my poem in the middle of the sports page. My father, unbeknownst to me, had gone down to the editor's office and handed him the poem, and he must have liked it and decided to print it. And there was my poem in the newspaper. I went to school the next day. All the players and students, teachers, coaches pat me on the back. Way to go, man. And I'm thinking, this is cool. Maybe I'll be a writer. So I date my moment of decision back to about that time. I've been lucky enough to have some nice things happen with my writing, and yet I think the thing I may be proudest of all is simply the fact that I'm making a living writing stories. No one had ever told me how hard that was going to be. It's one thing to write a book. It's another to get it published. It's yet another to sell enough to make enough money to pay a few bills, and then to follow that up with a second book that does the same thing, and a third and a fourth and so forth, until you reach the point where you can actually leave your day job and make a living at doing nothing but writing books. Nobody ever told me how almost impossibly hard that was going to be, and how lucky you were going to have to be able to do that. And I'm fortunate enough for that to be the case. And so simply to say that I make my living writing books is a lot bigger deal than those simple words sound like. I remember one night I was out shopping at a local supermarket, and those were the days when I was writing my books on the side in my spare time after dinner, and I recall that I had a problem because money was so tight that one of our kids needed cough syrup for a cold, and the other kids needed milk, and I did not have enough money in my pocket for both. Frankly, I forget what I bought that night. What I do remember is the painful dilemma of it all, and the wish that someday I might be in a position to write books that people might want to buy, so that I could have enough money in my pocket to buy both the milk and the cough syrup. And I'm happy to say that's happened. We were originally made aware of Stargirl societies by a correspondence with someone in Kent, Ohio. And it turns out that this was a teacher telling us about their Stargirl society. And it sounded so interesting, and we wanted to be encouraging. We decided to go out there and visit them and see what this was all about. And so we did. And what we did was we met with about 50 middle school and high school girls who met, and as far as I know, still do, meet once a month or so. And they take as their guiding point the Stargirl book and the Stargirl character, and they do Stargirl-like things. I know in one case I was told they got permission from the principal's office to kind of slink through the hallways of their school after hours, putting anonymous complimentary notes, slipping them into classmates' lockers, things like that. A kid in a Stargirl society, you might find her tossing loose change onto the sidewalk, like Stargirl does in the story. This Stargirl society, every year they have an inner beauty pageant. They do things like that, and it's come. Other Stargirl societies have come to my attention, and I think it's terrific. It works out very well being married to a writer. I don't envy people who aren't. I remember shortly after I met Eileen, we were coincided at a trolley stop. We were both going home after work. We worked in the same place. And the next thing I knew, she dumped a pile of loose leaf notebooks on my lap, and they were all poems of hers. And so we were introduced to each other as writers. And it's worked out very well because we are each other's first editors, really. I write a chapter, I give it to her, and she tells me whether it's any good or not. And she does likewise with me. There is no sense of competition or anything. People seem to assume that there is, but really it doesn't work that way at all. We're not each other's competitors, we're each other's supporters. So it really is terrific because there are so many things we can talk about and that we understand about each other's writing situations. Sometimes when I get requests to write a letter to some school kids encouraging them to read, one of the things I tell them is that they should be more like Maniac Magee than me. You see, when I was a kid, I didn't read much myself. I read the sports page. I read the backs of cereal boxes while I had my breakfast in the morning. I did once have a subscription to Bugs Bunny comic books when I was 12. That was about the extent of my reading. And now I really regret that. And so I ask kids, I say, you know, when Maniac Magee is running along the tracks, he carries something in his hand. And when he goes to play football with the high school kids, he's carrying something in his hand. And when he goes up to swing the bat against McNabb on the Little League field, he's carrying something in his hand that he puts down on home plate so he can use both hands for the bat. I said, in all these cases, what is it that he's holding? I'll ask kids in the audience that, and they'll all raise their hand and say, a book. And I say, yeah, it's a book. And I say, that's the point I'm trying to make. I think that I kind of, having my character, in this case Maniac Magee, carry a book with him everywhere he goes, I think might have almost subconsciously been my way of sort of going back and doing it right. I couldn't literally change my own childhood, but I could at least have my character do it the way I wish I had done it. And so that's what I tell kids, sure, go ahead and play, but read also. Do both. And of course, every writer gets that question, do you have any advice for young writers? And any writer could list you 100 little do's and don'ts to the point where you'd get so confused you wouldn't be able to write a word. So I like to distill it all into just one golden rule that I think may lie beyond all others, and that is simply write what you care about. That's what I say. When I write it down, I underline the word care. Write what you care about. Because ultimately it's not going to be about your punctuation or how straight your margins are or your correct spelling. The measure of your writing will be its ability to touch the heart of someone else, the reader. Well, if it doesn't touch your heart first, chances are you're not going to write it well enough to touch someone else's heart. So that's why I say write what you care about. And if you do that, you'll probably do your best writing.